So in this second video, we are going to talk about remuneration, which is basically once you establish all those conditions and the bank decides that you are a suitable candidate for a loan and you decide that the bank is a suitable lender, then you have to figure out how much are you going to take and how are you going to pay it back. So it's really the payment plan. So when we think about the components and structure of the remuneration plan, then some of these are shared with the elements we already talked about. So we mentioned collateral, and that could come into play and be a factor. We mentioned currency already. One of the things we mentioned the principal already, that's the amount being asked for. There's also the down payment. The down payment is how much you're going to pay for. Often it's somewhere between 5 and 10%. It could be even less than that. It could be even more than that. So if you're taking a loan of 40,000 euros, for example, then you pay 4,000 at the beginning, and then there's 36,000 left, and that 36,000 left is the amount that you're going to be charged for with interest over time. And that's one of the other fundamental elements. So all these are going to be in the notes, but the interest rate can be fixed, meaning it's unchanging over time, or it can be variable, which means it's going to be reacting to market conditions. And a lot of these elements are very similar to credit cards, which we talked about last semester. So a fixed variable rate is more stable, but often potentially a little bit higher. And a variable rate can fluctuate, and you're taking a little bit of a chance, but sometimes you can get a better rate, although it could go higher than you anticipate. So it's also important to decide on the dates. So for this, like, when does the money get released? When is the bank going to actually send it to your account? And on which date does interest begin being accrued? So that's often the same date at which payback begins. So there's often a grace period, and this is something we talked about with credit cards last semester, which allows you to, it's the period of time that you have without interest before, while you're after taking out the loan, but before you have to begin paying back the loan and before interest begins accruing on the loan. So you have to figure out, of course, the entire life of the loan, the duration of the loan, 20 years, for example, 10 years, 5 years, however much time you're going to pay it back, and then how often you're going to pay it. Some loans can be paid back quarterly, some could be biannually, some could be annually. Most often they're going to be monthly, but that interest rate is going to be calculated by year, and it's often called the APR, or annual percentage rate. So you also have to figure out the dates of installments. These seem like they're not that important. Like, yeah, I'm going to pay it back every month. But you can schedule these, and all of this is part of the negotiation of creating a loan, so that you're more likely to pay them back on the dates you're supposed to. So for example, if you get paid every 15th of the month, then you might schedule the installments for the 17th of the month, and then you give yourself a window just in case, or you give it yourself to the 21st of the month, or even to the 30th of the month, to make sure that you're in financial situation to pay back that loan. So of course, in the end, you want to be familiar with the total amount due. So when I say total amount, that's not just the principal, that's the principal plus the total amount of interest added on. This is often a pretty sizable amount, so the longer the loan and the higher the interest rate, the more you're going to pay. So often for traditional loans that go on for mortgages, for example, for a very long time, you end up paying almost double, if not more, than the amount that you took in the first place. So in the case that you are in a better financial situation, one other consideration that you want to think about when it comes to remuneration is, what if you want to pay it back early? So one, is it allowable? Are there any penalties or fees involved? So it's often possible, but the bank is going to be happy that you paid off the loan, but upset they're not going to get all of their interest. So this is, again, something that's negotiable and often put into the contract ahead of time. So if you have all of those, you essentially have the basic parameters to take out a loan. Now, there are some additional considerations, which is, What happens if the bank defaults? Now, default is one of the vocabulary terms I want to talk about. If you default on a loan or the bank defaults, then it basically means it's financially incapable of meeting its obligations. So you fail to pay your loan, or you fail to make your payments. Now, a default could be on one particular payment, but a default on the overall loan is a major problem. So if the bank defaults, you're in trouble because they may come after your loan and seek it earlier, and this have to be written into the contract. Often we say a clause in the contract. There also have to be clauses in the contract for changes in applicable law. Laws are constantly changing. Having some experience with loans in this country, I know of multiple laws that have changed in the life of a loan that I'm personally connected to. And that is often because either the government enacts new legislation or is reviewing previous legislation and making amendments to it. Generally, something to think about is taxes. There shouldn't be any when it comes to loans, so you want to make sure that that's built into the contract. You have to think about most essentially what happens if something goes wrong. So here, like, what are the immediate repercussions if we default, if we have late payments, if we have repeated late payments? It's, it could fall to, major problems. If it's an occasional late payment, there might be a fee only. So these can go from anything from like a fee to changing the contract, or if you violate the terms of the contract, then the contract might have to be changed. That'll of course be written into the original contract. There could be legal action or a lawsuit taken against you, an additional property or salary seizure based on the legal agreement in the original contract and what happens, further on. So a few other things to talk about. There is rollover. That's in your book, so I'd say look that up. I don't need to find it. Drawdown is also in your book, and it's in the vocabulary section, so take a look at that. One element that's not, I think, defined specifically in your book, but I want to talk about is binding. Binding means that you are connected to that contract in a way inescapably. If you're bound to something, that comes from binding, like to bind with string, to be tied to something. So if a contract is legally binding, which means you have a legal obligation to fulfill it, and to violate it will incur legal and financial consequences. So basically, if you have all of that worked out, then you're ready to take a loan out. And that's actually your assignment this week. So what you have to do is think of something that you'll be interested in purchasing. In the past, students have gone from a car or a motorcycle or a student loan or a place where they want to live or a business they want to invest in. There's a lot of different kinds of loans out there. So you have to decide on the purpose. And this is also in the notes, but you have to clearly detail the purpose of your loan with a precise description of what you intend to do with the money and why. So sometimes it's as simple as taking out a loan so that you can renovate your apartment, and you might use it on painting, and you might use it on a refrigerator, and you might use it on a microwave and a dishwasher and all that stuff. You have to know that. Not only for this assignment, but if you go to a bank and you say, I want $3,000 to renovate my apartment, they're probably going to ask you what you plan to do with that. And if you can't answer that question, if you don't have these precise details, like what exactly you're going to buy, you should know if it's a property you're going to invest in, I want a description of that property. If it's an apartment, I want a description of the apartment. What size is it? What's the address? Where is it? And it doesn't mean you have to actually take this loan out. This is, of course, just a exercise. But if it's a refrigerator, I want a description of the refrigerator. If it's a car, I want a description of the car. So a precise detail of what you intend to do with the money, and the bank would want the exact same thing before they ever gave you money. So, of course, you also have to determine the basic conditions and requirements using the categories that are in the notes, and which I've just talked about. Then there is the remuneration and calculation. So you use the categories from the notes to clearly detail a payment plan of the loan you're seeking. And then you very likely will need to employ a loan calculator. If we were in class, I could bring this up on the screen and show you some examples of loan calculators. A lot of banks, of course you have to choose a bank as well, will have that built into their website, but sometimes they do not. So what you have to do is use some of those basic numbers that you've established to create how much you would pay in the end and to write all that down. So it's a mathematical procedure that has complex algorithms. So that's why sites exist and why you don't have to do the math for yourself. But what you need to know is, how much are you taking out? How long do you plan to pay it back? What is the interest rate? And how often are you going to be paying it back? So just for example, you take a $10,000 loan, you want to pay it back in 5 years, you want to pay it back every month, so that's 12 payments a year times 5, 60 payments overall. You have a yearly interest rate, which is this much, and if you enter that information into a loan calculator, you'll get a result of how much you would pay in the end. So together, what I want is all of that. And then you have to know at the end how much you would pay, how much of that is interest, and how much of that is principal, and how much of that is down payment, etc. So take out a loan, but not for real. Don't get yourself in debt. It's dangerous. So take out a fake loan, but use a real world situation to base it upon. So that's your assignment this week. And if you have any questions, then please contact me. As we've done in recent weeks, I would like these assignments to be posted on our Facebook page in the comment section so that I can review your efforts, but also your fellow colleagues can compare their efforts with your efforts, and in a way they can, to a certain degree, but not fully, substitute for some of the dialogue and conversation we would have in class. So good luck in the meantime, stay safe, and contact me with any questions. Please post these by next Thursday before the May 1st holiday begins. That's it.